What people have to understand about the stock market is it's basically a hedge against inflation. It's the number one thing that will eat into your ability to meet your cost of living, whether you can have your wealth keep up with inflation. And I think crypto offers another path for that potentially has even more upside.
Now, you mentioned Anthony Scaramucci there. He's actually the founder of Skybridge Capital.
Anthony's a fascinating guy.
What are some of those early investments besides Bitcoin that really worked out well for you guys?
We were introduced to a young man named Sam Bankman-Fried.
Oh, yeah.
We found Polkadot and we got into bed with Polkadot. So
all right.
It's a fun story and we're really excited about the future. Capping supply, I think, is a huge deal. Dot stablecoin project is a huge deal. I'm looking forward to exciting times ahead for Polkadot.
The launch team wishes you good luck and Godspeed.
Space Monkeys blasting off with John Darsie, a partner at Skybridge Capital and CEO of Salt. We're going to get into that a little bit later. Very lucky to have him here on the show in New York City. John, welcome to Space Monkeys.
Welcome to New York City. I know you're from north of the border, but it's great to have you here.
I love coming down here. The walk over here was very colorful and vibrant. There's so many people here, there's always like a story happening.
The people watching in New York is unmatched. You know, I rode in from Long Island today, rode the subway, and people like to poo-poo on the subway, but you know, I enjoy the subway because the people watching, and it makes you feel like you're part of the city, part of the action.
You weren't born here though.
I was born in North Carolina. Born in North Carolina, raised in North Carolina. I went to Emory University in Atlanta, studied finance, undergraduate business at the business school at Emory, and moved up here to New York, met a Long Island girl, and the rest is history. I have 5 kids living out on Long Island, and I'm probably not escaping anytime soon.
You came up here looking for where the money is.
I guess that's right.
Yeah.
I was always fascinated from a young age with financial markets, and in the absence of any other passion, I followed that early passion as a kid about interested in stock market. My dad was always a big investor in the stock market. He had a subscription to something called Value Line. It was basically a guide to investing in stocks where it assigned scores for value and growth and safety and all these things. And so he would always talk to me about his portfolio and different stocks he was invested in. I would read Value Line at his office. He was a lawyer, but was a very long-term oriented, informed investor and managed his own portfolio. So that was sort of my first indoctrination into a fascination with the stock market. In the absence of any other great passion and always interested in business in general, followed that path and studied finance at Emory at the business school and made my way up to New York thinking maybe I was taking a pit stop, but here I am still.
Well, maybe you're the right guy to ask this question to, because I think a lot of people watching us right now is wondering what the heck is happening in the broader markets here. Maybe they have maybe 10% of their portfolio, maybe 20% of their portfolio in crypto and Web3, and nothing is playing out like we were told it's going to play out. Everyone's wondering if that 4-year cycle thing is still happening, it's softening. I don't know. What does it look like from your point of view?
I mean, broader markets, what people have to understand about the stock market is it's basically a hedge against inflation. And so the stock market generally is going to go up because prices are going to go up. And so you want to have exposure to the stock market because you want to be hedged against inflation. It's the number one thing that will eat into your ability to meet your cost of living is whether you can have your wealth keep up with inflation. So that's the number one thing, is that we have sort of persistent inflation. Some of it was driven by forces from COVID and things like that. But in general, there's forces, AI, technology that are causing much more significant inflation. And I think you have to own risk assets to keep up with that. And so I think, you got to stay fully invested and make sure you're hedged against inflation. And I think crypto offers another path for that potentially has even more upside.
So your idea is you have to stay in even in the hard times, ride it out?
You got to stay invested. My general philosophy is dollar cost averaging and then hold a little bit back for moments when there is turmoil in markets and try to allocate when there's blood in the streets, as Warren Buffett would say. It's very simple. There's a lot of randomness in financial markets and you're never going to time markets perfectly. And if you try to, you're going to miss big waves of outperformance. And so you want to be dollar cost averaging and then trying to allocate when you can a little bit more during big drawdowns.
And what's the time horizon? Is it 2 weeks or more like 20 years?
My time horizon for investing is trying to make sure my kids have a platform to go to whatever school they want to go to and not have any debt. That they have enough of a safety net so early in their career they can pursue a career that they're passionate about and that is a good fit for them rather than being motivated purely by money. I think most people observe that people who inherit a lot of money with no strings attached to it generally is not good for them. It creates motivation issues and things like that. So I think for me at this point, I'm sort of living for my children and trying to create the right life for them, not spoil them too much, but give them the opportunity to go out into the world without any debt and pursue something that they are good at and something that they're passionate about.
Beautiful. Now, you mentioned Anthony Scaramucci there. He's actually the founder of Skybridge Capital.
Anthony's a fascinating guy, and I view part of my job is letting the world know who the real Anthony Scaramucci is, because I think for a long time, especially right after he got into politics, there was a mismatch between who people thought he was and who the real Anthony Scaramucci is, and he's an extremely intelligent and well-read guy and a great partner and a great friend.
What do people get wrong about him?
I think he was in finance as a fund-to-funds manager at Skybridge, and then he had that brief stint as Trump's communications director. And I think he obviously blew out of there a little bit quicker than he or anybody else expected. I think his official tenure was 11 days, although I'll give him credit. He served on the Trump campaign. He served on the Trump executive transition team, one of 16 people. And then he was advising Trump informally before he took that communications director job. So sometimes people say, oh, his political career lasted 11 days. He was in the room for much longer than that, but his official tenure was 11 days. So I think, that caused some people to have a certain view of who he was. But
that's jealousy. Can you actually imagine being that close to the sun? Like how hot that would be?
Yeah, exactly.
Anybody judging him for that, I mean, they wouldn't last a second there.
People still don't really understand the story between him and Trump. I think people think that, he got fired quickly, and so he was mad that Trump fired him and he turned against him. It's really not the true story.
Yeah, sure.
The true story is, one, he supported him, when nobody else was supporting him. He supported him through the transition. He supported him, through his tenure as communications director. And even in the 2 years after he was fired as communications director, he did not turn on Trump, so to speak. He was still very supportive. But in Trump world, he sort of has a 100% loyalty test. And if you don't pass that test, then he might eject you from the orbit. And so I think Anthony offered some measured criticism here or there. The president again, didn't like it too much. And they had a little war of words on Twitter. Trump perhaps invoked Anthony's marriage, which was at one point on the rocks. He's since reconciled, and I'm close friends with and love his wife. But I think Anthony felt like
they get so dirty, man.
The president tweeting about his marriage and his family was maybe a step too far. And Anthony wasn't ready to accept that. But to go back to your original question, Anthony, he started Skybridge now 20 years ago. We just celebrated our 20th anniversary.
Yeah. Okay.
I've been with him 11 years, so he was running Skybridge for 9 years before I joined. But I've now been here for the majority of Skybridge's life.
So what's he like as a leader here?
He's a great guy to work for, as I mentioned. I think it's not an environment that's for everybody. It's definitely an eat what you kill, you sort of make your own bed type of environment where people have come in here and they've lasted 20 years. People have come in here, they've lasted 1 year. Right now we have sort of a very lean, tight-knit group of people, all who are pulling significant amounts of weight. And I think it's a very entrepreneurial environment. I've tried in my career to avoid the mega banks and those types of bureaucratic institutions because I don't think it's a good fit for my skill set and my personality. And here, I started doing some media stuff for him. I was helping him produce Wall Street Week, which was the historic show that he licensed and brought back. I was doing podcasts with him. I was helping him ghostwrite. We had editorials that were placed in the Wall Street Journal, New York Times. And so just through that work with him, I demonstrated to him, an intelligence and a knowledge base that, could be valuable on different sides of the business. And so my role has grown. Started my career as a trader, so I had that financial background and all that, but also have always been passionate about, media, communications type stuff. So I sort of straddle those two worlds as a partner at Skybridge on the business development side, and then also as the CEO of SALT, which is more scratching the creative itch that I have.
Was Skybridge always into alternative assets? And was that the focus back then? Crypto wasn't in the picture yet. So
crypto wasn't even on the radar when I joined.
Right.
But yeah, always we've occupied a very, I think, unique lane in the alternative investor universe.
What defines alternative, by the way, just real quick?
So alternative investments, generally that's hedge funds, private equity, some types of real estate. It's investments that are not stocks or very traditional fixed income like treasuries or munis or things like that. It's investors who are taking a view on a specific market, whether that be, fixed income or equities or other types of assets, and investing based on their discretion. And so it's an alternative sleeve in someone's portfolio outside of those traditional asset classes.
I've heard Skybridge described as like a fund of funds.
Yep.
Something like that.
Yeah, fund of funds. So hedge funds being one of the buckets in alternatives, we are primarily still, but even more so in the early days, a fund of hedge funds. So we take in money from investors and then we allocate it out through the hedge fund universe to all types of different hedge fund managers. And we typically invest those funds in a very thematic and somewhat concentrated way relative to some of our peers in the fund of funds space. And so over the years, that's manifested in the form of allocating heavily to activist hedge funds, because we thought due to macro forces that would be a successful hedge fund theme. It's included big allocations to structured credit, which served us well for a while. And then, when we encountered a once-in-a-generation pandemic, that did not serve us very well. So that was, one of the motivations for us to allocate to digital assets and crypto, is that we were looking for something that had a very different profile than structured credit, which was a significant theme for us for many years. And so we wanted to take on a little bit more risk. And then just on a macro basis, we thought that digital assets, once we entered the pandemic in particular, were destined to outperform. And so that's a thematic and concentrated bet that we made that has served us relatively well over the last few years, and one that we're enthusiastic about going forward.
Hard to ignore digital assets during the pandemic. That was a very exciting time. When did Skybridge kind of flip in? You guys started a Bitcoin product back then, right?
Yeah, we did, and then we also invested in Bitcoin was the more significant play there. But so basically in 2017, we were approached by friends of the firm, friends of Anthony, to say, hey, this crypto thing is real. You guys need to get up to speed on it and perhaps start investing in it. And so basically we got somewhat comfortable with the asset class and the idea that assets were going to appreciate like Bitcoin and others by 2017. But one, we've always been renowned for our operational due diligence. And I think from a custody and banking perspective, all those types of things, our operational due diligence team did not get comfortable that the industry was mature enough for us to deploy investor capital, in size into digital assets. And two, we talked to a lot of our LPs, which are ultimately who we answer to as people that allocate money to us. And there was not significant enthusiasm about us investing in crypto. And so we did some diligence on some funds. We formulated some ideas on the investment side, but we didn't ultimately pull the trigger on any crypto investments in 2017. And then, as crypto does, it went through some bull cycles and bear cycles. And then when 2020 hit and the pandemic hit, we were more comfortable on the operational due diligence side at that point as the industry had matured. And then from a macro perspective, we saw a heavy wave of inflation coming. We saw the world moving digital. We said, okay, we're going to talk to our LPs again, but we're going to ask for a little bit of forgiveness on this because we feel very strongly that this is the next wave of innovation that's going to transform financial services and going to create Bitcoin, as a unique asset similar to gold that's going to benefit from government debt and deficits and inflation and things like that. So, we started just by allocating to Bitcoin in October of 2020.
Do you remember what it was that kind of turned you on to the real utility?
We started with Bitcoin purely, I think as the digital gold narrative around that. And then, we were adamant in the first, I would say 6 to 12 months of that to say, we're Bitcoin investors. We're not crypto investors. We don't necessarily believe in the utility.
That was more legit.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of people, they go through the same experience that we did, which is Bitcoin is like the gateway drug. And then you're like, oh. So for us, it was like, all right, let's start with Bitcoin. And then, gradually our Bitcoin maximalism receded, and we realized there's a lot more to crypto and blockchain and digital assets than just Bitcoin.
It takes a second for it to kind of settle in, though, right? And get past the gold narrative.
I think that's right. But we still are, I would say Bitcoin first. Like it's our biggest position by far, and it's the asset that we're most enthusiastic about. But we've also been investors in some operating companies in the digital assets world, and then obviously several more tokens and protocols.
What are some of those early investments besides Bitcoin that really worked out well for you guys?
Well, I'm going to tell a story that might not reflect that well on me, but Anthony's talked about it a lot in public. But we, through the SALT conference, which is Skybridge being a leading fund of funds, SALT, when it was launched in 2009, 2010, became, over the subsequent few years, the leading industry conference for hedge funds and alternative investors and allocators who were looking to deploy capital into the hedge fund world. It was originally in Las Vegas, and it developed a big reputation and continued. I took over SALT about 7 years ago and have evolved it in different ways, but it's continued to be one of the preeminent events and communities in the alternative investor community. And so we were introduced to a young man in, I guess it was 2021, named Sam Bankman-Fried.
Oh, yeah.
By a mutual friend who Sam had identified SALT as one of the rungs on the ladder that he was going to climb to build his profile and reputation, I guess. And so he came to us and said, hey, I've heard great things about SALT. I really want to, plug into your network and sponsor your conferences and all that type of stuff. And so we did a bunch of channel checks. We talked to the A-list group of investors who were investors in FTX at the time, and called some political leaders that we knew he had connections to, and we got nothing but glowing reviews. And so
that's how it was. It was super legit.
Yeah.
We were all on board.
So we developed a relationship with him, and so as part of that, we learned about Solana, and so we have some exposure there.
Great.
We've invested in things like Avalanche, things like Polkadot, and what we try to identify is, one, assets that are technically sound, that we think are built well, have some, whether it's fixed supply or clear supply constraints that make future supply predictable, and then also rabid communities that are decentralized and broad. So, if you look at some of the ones that we're invested in, rabid communities who have driven the token forward and driven use cases and utility for the token, that's been a lot of the criteria that we use.
So strong tokenomics, rabid community, and some utility as well.
Exactly.
What stage of a project do you invest in? You came into Polkadot, not at the IPO, not early days. You kind of came in actually pretty deep into its chart, right? So what's the thesis there?
Yeah, we're not, I wouldn't say we're the first name that rolls off someone's tongue if they're looking for investors to invest in the earliest stages of a crypto project. One thing that we try to do now is sort of try to identify chains and tokens that we think will perform well in the post-hype cycle, is what I call it, which is, there's been the hype cycle, there's been, a lot of tokens issued, and which ones have held up well in an environment where, they're not the brand new shiny thing on the block.
Gotcha,
And that we think once all of the sort of speculative fervor of crypto recedes, which are some of the tokens that will still be standing and still delivering utility, and that the growth isn't going to be quite as explosive as it was during the early launch days, but we still think will relatively outperform other tokens for a longer period of time.
Yeah, I hear that. A lot of our audience is going to be Polkadot holders, fans of Polkadot.
Yep.
This fund has been holding Polkadot since, 2022?
I believe it was 2022. It's a funny story where we had our investment team, and I'm, just to be clear, I'm not a part of the investment team. I'm more on the business development side. But as a partner, I'm in the room for a lot of those conversations. But
sure.
We had been interested in Polkadot. It's a asset in a community that's very decentralized. Again, that's one of the criteria that we really look at when we're looking for new investments. And so we had interacted with members of the Polkadot team at industry conferences and things like that. But sort of the most in-depth conversation was Anthony and I were flying to Token 2049 in Dubai. If your listeners were there, they'll remember this, but there was a once-in-a-lifetime storm in Dubai.
I was there, man. Yeah, that was live.
There was a once-in-a-lifetime storm in Dubai. I was flying from New York. I go to the UAE a lot. We did a SALT conference there in 2019, and Anthony and I have built really deep relationships in that country. So I was flying from New York. He was flying from London. I'm arriving as the storm is hitting.
Yeah.
And so the rain's coming down, we're circling the airport in Dubai, and there's lightning coming down I had never seen. And they're like, what the hell is going on? Eventually, we're able to land, but by the time we land, the streets of Dubai were completely flooded. People are sleeping on the floor in the airport, and they're saying, dude, you don't want to try to go into the city. Everything's flooded. Cars are floating on the highway. But eventually, Emirates decides they're going to get a bus for people that were flying business class and first class, which I was fortunate enough to be doing. And we're going to try to get you to your hotel down by the Medina Jumeirah, which is where the hotel was, where the venue was for the conference. And so we get in a bus, and we drive, and we get stopped by the ocean of rain that was on the highways,
Right,
and
so
there were cars floating. So I'm confirming. So we're on the bus. We're on this bus for like 4 hours. It's like an apocalyptic scene where you have civilians out directing traffic and people just getting out of their cars because they're filled with water. But ultimately, after about 4 hours, Anthony and I, we make it to our hotel, and we see a couple members of the Polkadot team in the lobby, and we're trying to figure out, like, what the hell are we going to do? Like, are we going to stay for this conference? The hotel, by the way, there was water coming through the ceiling and through the doors, and we're talking to organizers of the conference who are saying that the place is flooded and they might be delayed in terms of the conference launching.
Yeah.
They told us they were going to close the airport starting in about, 6 to 12 hours for the next probably 48 to 72 hours, just so they could, get all the suitcases off the tarmac and get the planes in order and everything, and just, try to put everything back together in the UAE. In the lobby of our hotel were two senior members of the Polkadot team. I'm forgetting their exact names, but so Anthony and I got an opportunity amid all this chaos to have like a 2-hour conversation with members of the Polkadot team and go through what had been going on in the ecosystem and sort of the roadmap. And we said, wow, that sounds super interesting. Let's have a Zoom when we get home and see if there's some business to do there.
Okay.
And then meanwhile, what we decided after speaking to members of the government was we should get the hell out of here. So we hopped in a car, made our way through this ocean that was the Dubai streets. Some guy who knew the back roads that were in higher lying areas, I guess, got us back to the airport, and we flew home. So I did about a 5-6 hour trip to Dubai. It's 27, 28 hours round trip. But in the process of that 6-hour stay in Dubai,
found Polkadot.
We found Polkadot, and we got into bed with Polkadot. So
all right,
it's a fun story, and we're glad that we did, and we're really excited about the future.
No doubt. 2022 is a bit of a rough time to get into Polkadot.
Yeah.
But the advancements in the ecosystem have been great. Have you been following what's been happening? Or?
Yeah, we were talking a little bit earlier about the cap supply, and it's great to see Gavin, back in the cockpit.
Totally.
Like I said, we're focused on the future. Capping supply, I think, is a huge deal. The DOT stablecoin project is a huge deal with really novel concept around also reducing the cost of running the network. And Gavin, he's a god figure that every great blockchain, I think, needs. And obviously, he took a little bit of a step back from Polkadot for a couple years.
He doesn't really like to be. A big part of him says he doesn't like to be that god figure.
Well, you don't choose to be God. You just are God. He is the Polkadot God. And I understand that one of the great appeals of Polkadot and its ecosystem is the decentralization aspect. But what that also does is it removes decision-making authority from a central body, and thus, democracies don't arrive at decisions quite as quickly as dictatorships. And I'm not saying that Gavin's coming in to be a dictator. There's still going to be community governance of the network, but it does, create a little bit more decisiveness and conviction around different paths and different ideas that I think that figure provides, and that I think most great DeFi protocols, platforms have. It's another interesting aspect of what Polkadot is working on is proof of personhood. Because I think there's a big movement, especially in Silicon Valley. I know people like Brian Armstrong at Coinbase feel strongly about AML KYC, so anti-money laundering, know your customer. Like in our world, all that is paramount. We have to be extremely on top of who all of our clients are and who's moving money. There's red flags that banks have to observe and abide by in terms of the way people move money around. But there's way more efficient ways to build market structures that you use AI and you use blockchains to monitor that activity. And one of those is proof of personhood, where rather than like a very manual process that exists now, like you can detect potential illicit activity. That's one piece of proof of personhood that's exciting. And so you can sort of create embedded KYC AML on chain.
Sure.
But then there's also other interesting applications of proof of personhood that can benefit networks like Polkadot and make running the network much more efficient.
One cool thing I'm hearing coming down the line with proof of personhood as well is, how airdrops right now are mostly like based on your past on-chain activity?
Right.
Well, now you could get an airdrop based on proving that you're a person having never done anything on chain. So it's kind of like growing the pie in a way. It's an interesting distribution. possibility.
Yeah, no, it is very interesting. I think everyone's getting smarter about identifying people that are scamming airdrops and trying to create, multiple personas and things like that. And Polkadot, I think, is innovating in that space and creating reliable proof of personhood without having to, jab your eyeballs into the orb.
Yeah. Have you looked into the orb?
So I'm friends with the WorldCoin team.
Yeah.
And I think it's a super interesting concept. And I take them at their word that they're not capturing your information. They're creating a unique identifier that says you are an individual, and thus you get access to different features of the network. But I still think people in a world where everybody's a little bit more conspiratorial than once were, that the idea of scanning your retinas and your biometrics into a centralized system doesn't feel very exciting.
A buddy of mine told me recently, he said that he's a conspiracy realist.
Conspiracy realist, I like that.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, we get gaslighted a lot, so I don't begrudge people that go down the rabbit hole. There's some conspiracies that go a little bit deeper probably than I allow myself to go, but then there's a lot of conspiracies that over time they sort of are borne out a little bit.
Yeah, no doubt.
And so conspiracy realist maybe is the right way to go.
Okay, I was trying to talk about the U.S. there because what I wanted to get into is SALT, because despite the headwinds in crypto, SALT has been holding it down as a place for alternative investments in the U.S. and everybody who's interested in the U.S. capital markets. You said it's a little bit of a creative outlet for you.
Yeah.
How do you shape the SALT conference? What's your favorite part of running it? And what's been some successes?
Yeah, so the timeline for me and my sort of stewardship of SALT, which is what I call it, I'm trying to steward this great brand, and hopefully somebody else stewards it, past my time working on it. But Anthony went into politics in 2017. He served as Trump's communications director due to just some complex, the complexity of him being in politics, and he was trying to sell Skybridge at the time. There was no SALT conference in 2018, and so on the back of that, when Anthony came back to Skybridge and elevated me to a partner, he said, I want you to re-envision SALT.
Cool.
So it was this amazing brand, this amazing conference in Las Vegas that had happened for many years, and the folks that were running it previously did a great job building it into what it was. But to me, it had gotten stale. And so even before we invested in crypto in 2020, at the 2019 SALT conference in Las Vegas, we had a sleeve of digital asset programming that was much more significant than we'd ever had. And it was a big learning experience for me and all of us. And I think contributed to the enthusiasm that we developed on the asset class that caused us to make that investment decision in 2020. But then the pandemic hit. Everything got shut down. So it created even more of a space for me to say, okay, who are we? What are we trying to accomplish? So coming out of COVID, we decided to start to implement even more digital asset programming and sort of try to position ourselves as a bridge, no pun intended, between the traditional finance and alternative investor community and this new emerging digital finance or decentralized finance universe. And so we did that for several years with a conference in New York that our friend Sam Bankman-Fried sponsored for a couple of years. We did it with a conference in the Bahamas that we launched with FTX called Crypto Bahamas, which anybody who was there would tell you it was a fantastic event. Unfortunately, our partners on that weren't fantastic. So that didn't turn out that well. And so we continued to sort of split the programming and the audience between structured credit and fixed income investors and hedge fund investors that had no interest in crypto, and then some crypto programming. But what we ultimately decided to do was lean into our identity again as that bridge between those two worlds and embrace what is now, I think, our identity as a firm at Skybridge, which is that we are digital asset investors. Do we still have some exposures to traditional hedge funds and other assets? Yes, but I think our concentration of focus on crypto is only increasing. And so one of the things that I'm really proud of is this event that we have created in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, is coming out of the Crypto Bahamas debacle with FTX and again, our just continued evolution as a firm. I said, you know what, let's lean into that crypto identity and let's create a new digital asset focused conference in Wyoming, which is a state that's been very forward-thinking and supportive of crypto.
Wait, is it Lummis is in Wyoming?
Lummis, exactly.
Yeah,
so you have Senator Lummis, who has been Bitcoin and crypto's great champion in Congress, who's from Wyoming. The governor of Wyoming He used to be the state treasurer, so he's got a financial background. He was also on the Federal Reserve Board, has been very supportive. They've launched now a Wyoming stable token, so it's the first state or government entity in the United States to launch a stable token. It's not a CBDC, so I could have a whole nother conversation about that, but it's basically a stable coin, and the proceeds benefit the Wyoming schools, and they're still working through the technical aspects of it, but they're basically going to enable some state-related commerce, on stable coins and things
cool.
like that. It's super interesting. You should. I'd be happy to introduce you to Anthony Apollo, who's the executive director, but the governor is the head of the Stable Token Commission. So you have all these different ways that Wyoming's been supportive of digital assets, and I personally love the West. I love the mountains. I love Montana. I love Utah. I love Colorado, but I really love the Tetons. And so Jackson Hole is one of my favorite places. It's other beautiful places in Wyoming, but Jackson Hole being a natural destination. We created this event 2 years ago in Jackson Hole, and to me it's become the preeminent and most impactful crypto event in the United States. And it's about a 500-person, sort of invitation-only, very curated audience. And the feedback that we've gotten on that event for the last 2 years has been really strong, and it's been great to have some of the Polkadot folks there. Polkadot Capital Group represented Polkadot at the most recent SALT Wyoming Blockchain Symposium. So there's that event. We did an event in Bermuda, which is another really strong regulatory environment that was focused on digital finance adoption. We're trying to sort of use Bermuda as a pilot in terms of trying to drive an entire nation state to adopt blockchain payment rails and stable coins. They're potentially going to launch a Bermuda stable coin or Bermuda dollar. And then, just going forward, it's that role as the connector between the old world and the new is sort of where we want to sit. And so the next event we're doing is in London in November, sort of trying to orange pill or bring on board more traditional investors into this unstoppable movement.
So what's your favorite part of it? Is it set design? Is it curating the guest list?
Yeah,
What's
so
the best?
I try to stay as far away from the hardcore logistical planning as possible.
Okay, not a
at
logistics
a high
guy.
level,
Okay.
I'm picking the hotel and I'm curating the guest lists and the agenda and things like that. But my great team, Holly, Paul, and some previous partners that we've had here, they do the heavy lifting on the logistics side, which is no small feat at all.
No way.
It's a ton of work, and they do a great job with it. So they flex their creative muscles on that. My favorite part of it is just, again, going back to why we do SALT. And we don't really try to make money on the conferences. We try to break even where we can and all that. And so I'm able to meet people and deliver value to people in a asymmetric and non-transactional way. And that generates a lot of goodwill, and it helps you build a relationship that's more authentic and organic. And so my favorite part about SALT is just the people that I've met through the process of doing these conferences. Like I'm sort of like a walking CRM at this point about people in the hedge fund world and asset allocators and people in crypto, because I've spent time either curating them as a speaker at a conference or speaking to them at a reception or approving their registration, given that we have a more curated approach to the way we allow people into our events. And so, it's just I've created this incredible network of people that I've met along the way that's been very rewarding, both professionally and personally. The next one's in November. So in a little over a month, we're recording this on the last day of September.
Yeah.
So the next one's November 5th and 6th at the Chancery Rosewood in Mayfair in London, it's a beautiful new hotel. It's sort of the talk of the town in London. It's the former U.S. Embassy. They relocated the U.S. Embassy, and thus Qatari DR, which is a division of the Qatar Investment Authority, bought the real estate, redeveloped the hotel. It is truly spectacular, and they partnered with Rosewood Hotels on it, and it's now called the Chancery Rosewood. I think some people are excited just to come to the conference to see the brand new hotel.
So cool.
But London is a town that we have a great network in, that Anthony in particular, he has a very successful podcast in the UK, and so we're excited about
And the next
jumping
one
across
here?
the pond. So from there,
US?
we'll likely do Bermuda again next May. We'll be in Asia, Middle East at some stage, likely in early 2026 as well. The Jackson Hole Conference, which has become, I would say, our signature event at this point, is in August, which is a little counterintuitive, but we do it right before the annual Federal Reserve Economic Symposium that takes place in Jackson Hole. So
I see.
we're able to create a little bit of a juxtaposition between the more centrally planned aspects of the U.S. and global economy and the more decentralized elements and new technologies that we think can be beneficial to the Fed and others. So we had this year, we had 2 senior Fed officials. We had the vice chair for supervision of the banking system, Mickey Bowman, spoke at our event. And Chris Waller, who's essentially the member of the board of governors who's tasked with overseeing fintech and digital assets, spoke at our event. And it's something that even last year during the Biden administration that we couldn't even have dreamed about, having 2 Fed officials speaking positively about crypto at our conference, whereas the previous year there was a chill in the air in terms of our presence alongside that event. We also had the SEC chair and people like that. So I think their presence and their active participation in this movement has just supercharged everything.
Interesting times.
Yeah.
John, it was so nice to have you on the podcast. Where would we be without the allocators and the connectors like you? I have no idea. But thanks for coming on and sharing your perspective and your wisdom with us. We really appreciated having you on the show.
Well, I appreciate the kind words and thank you for having me on and looking forward to exciting times ahead for Polkadot.